do think architecture has a huge ego problem. Huge. This Reddit post that I found a couple years ago, they were asking the general population on this community what professions really have fostered a high sense of ego. And the results and comments were astounding. I mean, a lot of people said architecture, a lot of people agreed in replies. There were some comments about civil engineering as well. And I'm here to tell you that is not right. And we really need to be having these conversations regarding an architect's ego and how we can better serve our community. I think the main criticism for architects is that we still have so much to learn from other industries, and we think that we can do it all ourselves or tell other people how to do their jobs. Architects, generally speaking, will prioritize their own vision if they have inflated egos. The whole reputation of the entire profession really suffers because of this dynamic. We just need to start having these conversations, which I haven't necessarily talked to anyone about before. This whole egocentric mindset not only hurts the whole creative and architectural process, but also causes other industry challenges. And I feel like the industry as a whole really fosters this idea. So for instance, when you're in school, you have to defend your work against jury who is actively trying to rip your project apart. And you, as the designer of the project, try your absolute hardest to defend it in all of its glory. But in a way, this created the perfect environment for people to develop and inflate their egos. A lot of times it's ego mindset, and also depends on what school of thought you were taught in. Architects will prioritize form over function, aesthetics over usability, and ego over community. I've worked with a couple, professionally speaking, over the past couple of years, and I've noticed that a lot of times older, more seasoned architects seem to have bigger egos. They seem to be unwilling to work with me. I understand that I'm still a student of architecture, but at the same time, I have now had to figure out how to navigate and work with people with very large egos. I think the main criticism for architects is that we still have so much to learn from other industries. We're supposed to help coordinate the project and see it serve the community in appropriate manners. I think a lot of times ego truly gets in the way, and it's incredibly concerning. All the skills and wonderful things I learned about the power of design become threatened because of somebody's ego. That's crazy to me. So when architects become far too concerned in terms of creating their signature landmark, that is when everything is compromised and at risk. In a way, the industry promotes this idea that architects should be willing to compromise its inhabitants in order for a certain architect to put their stamp on the drawing and say, hey, that was my idea. And I'm here to tell you that is not right. And we really need to be having these conversations regarding an architect's ego and how we can better serve our community. Because right now I have been in several buildings that completely alienate communities and create exclusionary environment. And it is a school problem too. Now, of course, it is not a university's goal to breed this sense of egoism in architecture students. Aspects of learning, though, really promote an environment where you have to develop a strong ego in order to survive. In a nutshell, from my experiences, from talking to all of you guys about your experiences, architecture school really cultivates such a competitive environment between its students. Now, let's first talk about studio culture. Studio-based culture breeds competitive natures. It's not beneficial, it's exhausting. Students are tired, incredibly individualistic, which is not anyone's professional experience either. Everything's collaborative. I actually talked about the individualistic experience in this video here. This in turn kind of promotes the survival of the fittest mindset, where you start defending your work to your studio professor relentlessly, thinking, this is awesome, this is great, I made such a great move here, here, and here. It kind of impacts how much you can learn and digest if you're constantly on the defense. Architecture school fosters an environment of competition. I felt like I wasn't necessarily graded on a generic scale. If my peers pulled 5 all-nighters in a row and I only pulled 1, of course their work is going to look better and more developed. This is such an awful culture that school has cultivated for its students. And after talking to so many other students from around the United States, from around the globe, I feel like this is a universal architecture school experience. We always feel like we're being judged against our peers and not necessarily some sort of rubric, right? So if somebody's exceeding expectations and you're just meeting expectations, you aren't performing well in a class, even though your idea might be rather solid. But just because it's this toxic work environment and ongoing pressure to continue to perform your peers, this sense of competition also carries in to professional practice. There's also relentless working hours. It is absolutely insane. Pressure to excel will naturally imprint in your mind. External validation equates success, also leads to an inflated sense of self. Such an explicit sense of hierarchy in students and educators, which can just totally be exhausting to continue to cultivate and experience. I personally went to architecture school for 7 years. That's insane, right? And I was constantly feeling a sense of subordination to my studio professors, but in a way, the dynamic fosters a sense of superiority amongst the professors. And as a student, as you witness this over years, it definitely influences how you view architecture, especially as a professional. I also want to talk about the concept and role of the master architect. This is a criticism on architectural history and how those classes always seem to run. I've taken multiple classes. You already know the channel. I love history. I love teaching history, but I love learning history first and foremost. And all the architectural history classes that I have taken always talk about the starchitects and how amazing they are. Like Le Corbusier, Frank Gehry, Zaha Hadid, to name a few, and they are often celebrated in school for their unyielding confidence. So this in part allowed them to break certain barriers and boundaries and create the groundbreaking work that they are noted for today. However, when you start breaking these boundaries, even prior to breaking any such boundary, it's safe to say there's a lot of ego attached to this. It's hard to remain humble. And this glorification and idolization of these starchitects is actually awful. It's not great. A lot of starchitects tend to prioritize their own visions over anyone else's just because it's their idea. And I'm not saying that they don't have good ideas. I'm just saying willingness to understand perceptions and different creative solutions to the same problem, part of the design process. Because a starchitect has encountered various issues, it doesn't mean that others' proposals and other solutions to a particular design problem are invalid. I have never once read a personal excerpt from somebody working under a starchitect absolutely raving about their experience. They tend, generally speaking, I'm not naming any names, they tend to really foster toxic work environments, but their name is never known, right? So the starchitect always does the design, but it's the intern making $10 an hour that actually executed the vision. Somebody far lower than this starchitect is the one who did all the hard work and the drawings and stuff. So I can go on a whole tangent with this for sure. But my point is that starchitects kind of created this sense of legacy that students can look up to and aspire to. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but I'm saying we also need to be talking about egos. One, school needs to be more gentle, where we don't necessarily have to rip everyone's building to shreds and make people cry behind dumpsters after you present. I don't think that's beneficial. I don't think having a ridiculous work environment where students become so emotionally attached to their projects isn't beneficial either. I think what we need to start doing is teaching students how to take constructive criticism and implement it, because it shouldn't be personal. There should be no personal attacks on any student in any way, shape, or form. And also the professors who have very inflated egos, professors who have exploited student work in the past, shouldn't be acceptable. Really should not. And if this video is starting to offend you, I really hope that you can take a step back and start asking yourself some cool questions. I'm not saying that we should not celebrate the accomplishments of the masters. The first step that really introduces the world of architecture to nice emerging students should not be a traumatic experience. My next note, which I kind of briefly touched on, is the clashes in terms of collaboration. Architects, generally speaking, will prioritize their own vision if they have inflated egos. And I'm not saying having a strong design philosophy is a bad thing. Please do not twist my words. But I do think we have to get to the point where certain architects stop trying to make an iconic landmark, but actually consider community needs, environmental impact, all the actually really important stuff. Architecture is inherently collaborative. There's a sense of a symbiotic relationship between architects, engineers, contractors, consultants, interior designers, you name it. The AIA reported that, a good, strong teamwork makes the dream work, basically. That's basically what they said. That collaboration is essential for any project success. People who are stubborn, hard to collaborate with, are generally speaking unable to compromise on a lot of components and aspects of the design. This in turn can lead to budget overruns. A survey done in the UK actually by the construction firm Atkins said that over 40% of construction delays are actually caused due to poor communication between the architects and designers and the contractors. And because architecture school is more focused on creating an environment of competition rather than collaboration, I think in a way sometimes I witness projects go down where it seems like the contractor or the engineer or whoever is fighting the architect and vice versa, like the architect against the world, and I don't know why that's the case. This in turn perpetuates this cycle of individualism that we've seen all throughout architecture school, and it's not productive. Ego can also impede on client relations. And sometimes, like we mentioned, certain design considerations are pushed aside because the focus isn't necessarily on user experience, but more for wanting to do what the architect wants to do. What are we doing here? And once again, this is a residual effect from how toxic school environments are. If you were never taught on how to handle and intake criticism when you're forced to defend your work all the time in school, it leads to this cycle, really. Sometimes this goes as far as to leading to legal disputes, especially in America. The whole reputation of the entire profession really suffers because of this dynamic. Now, we talked a little bit about how the ego can influence urban landscapes as a result. A lot of architects are on this ongoing quest, right, to have a signature style. And this, as a result, kind of overlooks the community needs. And there are two real-world examples that I want to bring up where the architect somewhat ignored, if not completely ignored, community needs along with budget. So the first one I want to talk about is the Pruitt-Igoe. It's a housing project located in St. Louis and was actually demolished. This is exactly what happens when the architect's grand vision does not meet the practical requirements. It was mid-20th century design. It was designed by Minoru Yamasaki. I already did a video on him. I believe he was incredibly optimistic, and I haven't necessarily read if he has a huge ego or not. But this project kind of illustrates the inability of taking criticism and also listening to community feedback in the design. The intention behind the project was to provide a modern residential solution for low-income occupants. It consists of 33 buildings, 11 stories high, and was constructed in a very modernist architectural style and was demolished 2 decades after it was completed. Basically, it was too ambitious. It didn't help the residents. It didn't meet their requirements, and it was demolished because it wasn't helping anyone. Another example is located in Spain. This is Santiago Calatrava's City of Arts and Sciences, and it looks like an architectural marvel, but it had tremendous costs. There are several maintenance issues which should have been brought up multiple times, and I'm sure it has been multiple times. This allure of achieving this grandiose structure outweighed any practical consideration. Cutting edge form and design of the building kind of led to construction considerations, but also maintenance concerns. I'm not saying architects can't dream. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying we still live in a very practical world where finances will always be a concern, and that should be a concern for the architect. Maintenance expenses can add up. I'm on a multi-million-dollar project right now, and we always talk about the maintenance, ease of cleaning the building all the time. In this last part of the video, I kind of want to talk about a way forward. I think in order to address these issues by encouraging self-reflection, we can continue to grow, myself included. Like I said, I went to architecture school for 7 years. I had to defend my work for 7 years, but I also have to take a step back and realize my points of growth. Architects and professors, especially professors, need to take note of how influential the ego can be on their students, on their younger colleagues. We need to cultivate more culture of humility, empathy, and openness to feedback. And I think that would make design even better. And I don't know why we haven't done this yet, why this isn't the gold standard. Creativity can flourish in collaborative settings, and it can flourish with constructive criticism. We have to stop thinking that we have to defend our initial design intention and our signature design look, because there's always room for growth. Architectural education also needs to start incorporating classes and seminars and ways to teach other skills that aren't taught in studio classes, such as strong communication, teamwork, conflict resolution. It's stuff that you should learn when you were in kindergarten, right? But I think all important and necessary skills that you need in order to thrive in this industry. Not to sound cliche, but by working together, we can make the professional practice tremendously better. So architecture has such an incredible power to create spaces and enrich the lives of others. And let's do something with that. Let's be better. Let's continue to better and enrich our personal skills and the lives of others. So you guys know the drill. Let me know what you thought about my take on architecture school and also professional practice. If you haven't seen last week's video, it is on place theory and why you're lonely.